Hey, how's it going? Zach D Productions here, and I'm here for my end of the year list 2023. I know it might seem a little early for some to do an end of the year list for my favorite albums of the year, because I know that some people wait at least until December. I know we're in November, but to be honest, there's not really any other albums I'm really looking forward to this year that I would even consider putting on an end of the year list. So I've pretty much listened to all the albums that I intended on listening to as far as 2023 album releases go. So this is a top 5. I did decide to narrow this down to a top 5, but before we get started with the top 5, I do have 3 honorable mentions. Now, one of the honorable mentions is Dying of Everything by Obituary. Now, I might get some looks for placing this album in the honorable mentions category instead of the top 5. But for me, I like Obituary. I think they're a solid band, but when it comes to death metal, it's not really something that I listen to all that much, as some of you may know. Obituary is probably one of the few death metal bands that I actually do like a little bit. But yeah, I just haven't been returning to this album in recent time. I mean, I do think it is a strong album, very solid death metal, and I think it's maybe their best in a while, I would say. So it is a good album, it just didn't make the cut for me. Next, we have Rated R by Red, the newest album by Red. No surprise, this is in the honorable mentions category. I think it's a decent album. I'm sure a lot of you guys know my thoughts. I was just kind of underwhelmed by it. I do think it is one of their weakest albums, but it does have some good songs. It still has some solid material on it. But all in all, it's just kind of a mixed bag for the most part. So that's why I decided to put it in the honorable mentions category, because there are stuff on the album that I do like, but I just expected more from it, that's all. And then finally, we have Mirror to the Sky from Yes. No surprise, this is in the honorable mentions category as well. This album was kind of underwhelming for me. I mean, I liked the first single whenever that came out, so you know, I had a little bit of hope for the album. It's still a pretty good album for what it is, but yeah, it's another album you could say I just expected more from, but I was just left kind of underwhelmed by this one. I do think that Yes needs to retire already. I don't even think any of the original members of Yes are even in the band, so there's that. So those are my 3 honorable mentions. Okay, so now on to the top 5 of 2023. So starting off with number 5, we have Good Night, God Bless, I Love You, Delete by Crosses. If you don't know, Crosses is Chino from Deftones' side project. This is one of his side projects. I've kind of had an interest in checking this out because I know that it was neither rock or metal. It is more on the electronic side of things, so I figured, well, electronic music and Chino's vocals, that actually kind of piqued my interest because I do like Chino's vocals. And when it comes to electronic music, I do like some electronic, for those who don't know. But I guess it depends on the type of electronic music that it is. It's something that can be kind of hit or miss for me. But I actually do like the type of electronic music that Crosses does. I think they do it quite well. So their newest album, Good Night, God Bless, I Love You, Delete, was a pleasant surprise. I actually really like this one. The song Runner is a song that I've definitely been listening to a lot. It's definitely one of the highlights for me off this album. So Cross's latest album, it definitely had to make the cut for my top 5. So moving on to number 4, we have Foregone by In Flames, which was definitely a pleasant surprise for sure, especially considering how more recent albums from In Flames have been. Particularly albums like Battles and I the Mask. Those albums I think are okay at best, but all in all, those albums just have really bland songs with a few exceptions. I mean, both those albums do have their highlights, but all in all, they're just kind of average, mediocre albums, I would say. But I think Foregone is actually the best thing that In Flames has done in a number of years. I would say this is probably their best album since Sounds of a Playground Fading, which I know that some fans are not a fan of that album. I know that there's some In Flames fans that do like the album. I feel like that album kind of has a cult fan base, you could say. I'm actually one of those people that do like Sounds of a Playground Fading, but I would say that this is their best since then. This one definitely leans closer to their older sound than their last few albums, for sure. A lot of great tracks on here. State of Slow Decay, Meet Your Maker, Foregone Part 1 and 2, those are great. The Great Deceiver, and The Transmission. Solid tracks, really solid tracks from In Flames. Some of their best work in a while, I would say. So props to In Flames for this album. This is definitely a step in the right direction for the band. The sound is heavier, and it's just all in all a step in the right direction for this band's career. So Foregone by In Flames, pretty solid album. So that's what's at number 4 for me. So moving on to number 3. Now number 3, we have Scorched by Overkill. Of course, thrash metal legends, they came back with this album here, and it's really strong. It's a really strong album. Now, do I think it's better than their last album, The Wings of War? I'm still thinking about that even to this day. I'm not sure. I still might like The Wings of War just a little bit more, but this is still a pretty strong album. Still a really solid thrash metal, and when it comes to one of the best metal releases of the year, this one is definitely one of the best of the year, I would say. If you're a fan of thrash and haven't heard this, you got to check it out for sure. Of course, you have great tracks on here, like the title track Scorched, which is easily one of the best songs on here, one of the highlights. Going Home, The Surgeon, which was one of the singles. Twist of the Wick, Wicked Place. These are great tracks for sure. So yeah, Overkill's newest album, Scorched, really good. Definitely check it out if you like thrash. So Overkill's newest album is coming in at number 3. Okay, so number 2, we have Metallica's latest album, 72 Seasons. So this album here, I do think is honestly Metallica's best album in a while. I know it might be unpopular for me to say, but I do think that this is probably Metallica's best album since the Black Album. This album definitely leans closer to their thrash roots than anything that they've done before. Now, yes, Death Magnetic and Hardwired to Self-Destruct, they did try to go back to their more thrash-driven roots on those albums, but I feel like it's done the best here on this album. I feel like they really pulled it off the most well done on this album. So yeah, great tracks on here, like of course the title track 72 Seasons, Shadows Follow, Lux Eterna, Room of Mirrors, just to name a few tracks. But yeah, really solid album, really solid album. I was kind of tempted to place this at number 1, and you know what? There might be days where this does end up being my favorite album of 2023, but there's another album that I think surpasses this one as being album of the year, but still 72 Seasons by Metallica, still a strong album, still worth checking out. And if you claim to be a metalhead, you definitely have to check out this album because of course it is Metallica, and when it comes to metal just in general, Metallica is definitely a must. They're definitely a must. So 72 Seasons by Metallica, really strong album, so that's what's coming in at number 2. Okay, so number 1, this is honestly a surprise for me. I'm really surprised that this one made my number 1 because I don't think their last album made my number 1 of the year that album came out, but I think that they really stepped it up with this one. I really think they did. I think they've improved in a lot of ways on this album. So my number 1 album of the year, at least for right now, like I said, there might be days where Metallica's latest album ends up being my album of 2023, but you know, it kind of goes back and forth between that album and this album. So yeah, I just think this album here has a lot more to offer. So my number 1 album of the year is Truth Killer by Sevendust. Definitely a surprise for sure. I was not expecting it. I was not expecting this album to make the top 5, you know, but it made it. It actually made it to number 1, at least as of right now. This album definitely surprised me, and I think that this is probably their best album since, probably since All I See Is War, which I know was only a couple albums ago. Now, when it comes to their last album, Blood and Stone. I thought that that was a good album. I still think it is a good album, but it's not one of their best. It's not one of their best, but I think when it comes to their more modern work, I'd say this is one of the best of their more recent stuff. Was very surprised by this one. Great songwriting, great vocals from Lajon and everything. There's a lot of strong tracks on here for sure. See if we could pull up the track list here. Let's pull up the booklet. So, of course, just looking at some of these songs, you got the title track, one of the highlights. You have Everything, No Revolution, Sick Mouth. You also have Holy Water, Superficial Drug, Messenger, Love and Hate, and Fence. All solid tracks. So yeah, Sevendust's latest album, Truth Killer, was pleasantly surprised by this one. Really good album for sure. If you like Sevendust, definitely check this out. Check it out if you're into alternative metal or hard rock. Definitely an album worth listening to. So yeah, as of now, this is my #1 album of the year. So Truth Killer by Sevendust. That's what's making my #1. So let me know what you think of this top 5. Do you agree with my top 5? Do you agree with some of it? And what are your top 5 favorite albums of 2023? Feel free to let me know. So on that note, thank you for watching. Have a good one.